All the grid-forming battery projects that entered the tender failed the technical assessment, and that was the same in round one as well. It's been a shock to quite a lot of people, I think, and it's quite disappointing. And if you have some technical criteria and everyone fails, it hints more maybe an issue with the technical criteria than perhaps the technology itself.
Hello, today we'll talk about increasing complexity in power system studies and the difficulties in achieving compliance. We are consultants from Blake Clough Consulting today, and we'll have a great conversation about harmonics, sub-synchronous oscillation, modeling, and collocated plans, as well as stability market and tenders. Okay, let's talk now about stability market tenders. So first, can you explain what NISO stability market tenders are?
Currently, there are two types of stability market tenders being run. First one is the midterm market, so it's a year ahead acquiry of stability services, and that kicked off, I believe, 2 years ago. And those kind of tenders aim to acquire stability services in the grid. So this is taking into perspective the changing system kind of requirements. So in the past, a service like inertia was provided by synchronous generators, and it wasn't even treated as a service because it wasn't an inherent capability of that technology type. But now, since inverter-based resources are kind of replacing a lot of synchronous generation in the system, this is no longer an inherent capability of the components or of the generation in the system. So then NISO is seeking alternative ways to get these services to the network. So the midterm is an example of this, where they are looking to get these stability services contracted for 1 year, and that's kind of the main market that's been going on for now. But another market is kicking off as well, which is the long-term tender is kind of surrounding, and that's seeking inertia, voltage, and fault level kind of contribution within the network for a 10-year delivery period, I believe, and that's supposed to kick off in 2029. But the tendering process has kicked off, so it's aimed to acquire these services and start to get the contracts undergoing this year. So these are kind of the different markets and that you have the ability to participate in if you're something like BESS, or this kind of offers you new market opportunities for these technology types, specifically grid-forming controlled inverter-based resources have the ability to participate in these.
And synchronous condensers.
Synchronous condensers as well, yeah. There is one other market that's kind of been on the agenda but hasn't been kicked off yet, which is also the day-ahead market, which we don't know if will kind of ever become reality, but it's being discussed. But then instead of having like a full year contract or a 10-year contract, you'd have maybe be able to acquire something like inertia services a day ahead of delivery, which would be a very interesting market to see come to light.
So we just got the results from the midterm tenders. So what is the main takeaway, and what can we say about those results?
So yeah, we just got the results for the midterm round 2, and it looks like all the grid-forming battery projects that entered the tender failed the technical assessment, and that was the same in round 1 as well. So this has been, it's been a shock to quite a lot of people, I think, and it's quite disappointing. And if you have some technical criteria and everyone fails, it hints more maybe an issue with the technical criteria than perhaps the technology itself, right? So this is something a lot of people have been asking questions about, and we've been starting to get some more detailed feedback on kind of what the expectations are and the reasons why some of the assets on projects that we worked on for the midterm failed. And it seems to be a lot around expectations and performance regarding phase angle jumps and the representation of a voltage source behind an impedance is the wording that NISO uses. But yeah, it seems like coming from the feedback, they have a lot more expectations and criteria that wasn't really communicated at all beforehand. So, I've heard things like their expectations of having 0 oscillations, for example, which is not written anywhere in the sort of ITT documents and technical requirements. So I think it's a case of they need to be communicating better. I mean, they have released some additional guidance regarding the phase angle jump, so it seems like hopefully they will continue to provide more information. But really we need more black and white pass-fail criteria ahead of time, rather than just guessing at what they're kind of expecting. But I think at this stage, we have a better idea of what they want, but, it's very hard, until we have some more clear rules and guidance on the expectations on how, we'll actually be able to get these projects kind of greenlit and approved into the markets.
Yeah, and especially when we're now in the process of working for different developers when they're participating in long-term stability tender, and we have those results from midterm tender in our mind. We're having discussions with them to understand their requirements so that we represent those in the long-term tenders.
And I think, developers will soon be getting really put off and entering into these markets because, they have to spend a lot of time, effort, and money to enter into these tenders, and for, everyone to fail. It's I think sooner or later the appetite to go for these tenders is going to start to wane, and obviously that's not good for the consumer, because at the moment they're just procuring basically synchronous condensers, which may not be the most economical solution. At the end of the day, the bill player and the consumer is going to be what's going to have to foot the bill for these things. So
I think there's also a point to be made about it hindering maybe grid forming technologies to become kind of more commercially viable. So this is kind of one of the key drivers for developers to start to invest in grid forming technologies, because this provides you a way to get paid for a service you can provide with grid forming that you wouldn't otherwise be able to deliver. So if there isn't any market incentive for you to move towards grid forming, then maybe the technology there won't be any reason to choose it over the traditional grid following controls. So it's definitely worrying that the grid forming batteries, for example, are not getting passed based on technical requirements. So hopefully in the future, and hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to see some of them pass the technical criteria and be able to deliver these services.
I mean, I think it's understandable that NISO are very conservative and have a low risk tolerance around relying on grid forming technologies to provide inertia services or to stabilize the network, because obviously it's a very important thing. And going ahead, if we relied solely on them, they're not, they are quite a mature technology now, but nowhere near as mature as things like synchronous condensers and synchronous machines. So I understand they have this conservatism and they have high expectations in terms of the technical requirements. I think the main issue is that these haven't really been communicated properly, and they need to be better defined.
Okay, thank you. And when are the next midterm tenders? Or is it ongoing?
The intention for the next midterm is to, the ITT has been published, so that should have been communicated to developers by now. I think the deadline for submission to pass the technical criteria is aimed to be in May, which is the same time as the long-term tender. But there might be some updates to this. We've seen some delays in the past, so there could be some delays to this, as there's quite a short time span to actually go and, compared to last time around, at least, there's quite a short time span to finish all the studies and technical requirements sometimes. So we'll see. It's so in the open.
Okay. Is it possible for a developer to participate in both of those at the same time?
Should be, yes.
I think they can submit into both, but I don't think you can be paid for the service twice, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But you can participate in both.
You should be able to participate in this year's midterm.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Because, the delivery of the long-term one started to
now.
So.
And you could, for example, be providing inertia based on the midterm, but then provide restoration services during the long term, right? As long as they don't conflict.
Yeah, because I think stability services as well, for the midterm, there was only inertia services required.
Yeah.
And now for long term, it's both short circuit and inertia.
Yeah.
I had also a question more about the future and what needs to change to like counteract those those compliance issues?
I think it's allowing more time. I think, right? Everything. The issue is that often we get the start date of wanting to do compliance studies gets pushed back a lot because you're waiting for the input data in terms of the cables, the transformers, all this kind of equipment to be finalized, and not enough time is allocated to do these things. But doing things like earlier stage studies like feed level, so maybe before you finalize all your plant equipment, you can do stuff with just like assumed data and try to de-risk a lot of this stuff early on. For some studies that makes sense, other studies not. If you don't have the dynamic models from the suppliers, then you can't do the dynamic studies. But obviously, you need to try and get those and pick your suppliers early and just leave as much time. I think time is usually the main resource that's constrained on these things. That becomes the biggest problem.
There's also maybe allowing a little bit more time for some of these kind of new requirements to become a bit more standardized. So I think with just time, the experience with kind of different technology types and different manufacturers, you will start to see maybe a more clear-cut kind of line between what's going to be compliant and what is not. So there's been quite a few requirements that have been updated in the past few years. There are new requirements coming in, so giving a little bit of time for kind of just having more of an understanding of what the expected performance is, especially with seeing what projects are passing and based on what criteria. I think just in time it will become easier to know what's going to be compliant and what's not.
My last question was, how can Blake Clough Consulting help achieve compliance?
I think we can discuss around how we can improve our methodology. So for instance, the work group thing that we do, I think it's very beneficial in terms of when there are documents continuously being updated and there is a particular team. So we have internal work groups where there's a small team of 3 to 4 people assigned to each kind of topic, like for instance, EMT simulations, RMS model, harmonics, SSO studies. So this is a job of that team to, keep them updated about whatever is happening around. If there's any update in the documentation, they update our templates, our scripts, methodologies to, keep ourselves updated with the updates being given out. So yeah, I think that's one of the efficient way of, just to be most updated.
So thank you very much to all our consultants for this really interesting discussion. And if you have any question about those topics, please reach out to Blake Clough Consulting.